A major part of the Comp 1 curriculum is a research paper, and we're going to do our research paper based on the book that we've been reading, The White Darkness, and really some of the topics that we can pull out of that book because it's so rich. So what I want you to do for your semester paper is a kind of historical or expository reflection on one of the following topics, or as I had said in one of our previous videos, you could choose one of the topics from the presentations that we had done, not the survival guide, but the initial micro presentations or the latest version of the micro presentations. So a couple of the things that I want you to choose from. First off, let's go over the expectations. I want a 3 to 4 page paper. I know sometimes the number is kind of the hang up, and there's 7 to 10 page papers, but for me, I think less is more if the content suits. So I want these to be 3 or 4 really good and concise pages where you're examining the topic thoroughly. I want you to have at least 3 sources, and by 3 sources I mean the book The White Darkness, which you will reference primarily in your introduction and maybe in the conclusion, and then 2 additional sources that you're going to include in the paper. And I'm going to go over real quick where to look for sources and such in just a moment. But a couple of things that I'm looking for also is I want you to really be able to understand the concept of the book and how it connects to something in kind of the greater world, in our lives today or throughout history. So the first one is exploring the psychological impact of isolation and extreme environments. So Henry Worsley spends a lot of time alone. So I want you to examine what that time alone and dealing with harsh conditions and all of that stuff does to mental health and resilience. So you're really doing kind of a deep psychological study of what isolation does in these extreme environments. The second choice is Antarctic exploration. Why the appeal of Antarctica? What's the history of it? What are the challenges that are out there? And what is now, today, the contemporary significance of still wanting to explore the polar caps, in particular the South Pole and Antarctica? And the third one is the ethics or morality of extreme adventures. Using Henry Worsley as a case study, what's the moral implications of these types of things? How is it impacting the environment, families, all of those things that go into, or actually more come out of these explorations? Are they entered into selfishly? Is there, should there be some sort of legislation that prevents these or limits these? Should you only go with guides? Things like that. So you'll address all of those questions. And you can also use some of the previous topics that we discussed in the modules, which are kind of related to these, but let me just go quickly and pull a few of those back up to remind you. In our first micro presentation, we examined the Nimrod expedition. That's a very specific topic. Wildlife in Antarctica, which is one of the elements of the topic. The plight of the Endurance crew, and we'll kind of stay away from the cricket one. I'd rather you don't choose that for this because it might be a little bit more difficult to get the amount of information that you need. And I think the second set of micro presentation might be actually better. Adrenaline junkies and what drives them, and we kind of have that psychological connection. The history of polar exploration, which is part of that other topic. So you can see the topics I chose for the big paper are kind of connected to the smaller topics that we examined. Weather patterns in the South Pole is related to one of the other topics as well. So a couple of things. When you're finding sources, part of our culture and part of the problem that we have in communicating in today's culture is understanding what is and is not a reliable source. So what I would like you to do is I would like you to find sources on your own. I used to be a staunch, you have to use a database type person, but I think using a database, while it does offer vetted sources, it doesn't allow for you to examine the viability of a source, which is part of the process. So we posted this back with our speech analysis paper. So I do want you to revisit, and most importantly, I want you to understand how to determine if it's reliable and what identifiable bias are there, so you can then verify the source yourself. So do bear that in mind, and just like the other paper, we are going to use MLA format, and you can find all the information you need on the Purdue OWL website. So be sure to use that with general formatting, works cited formatting, and in-text citations as you go along. I always find it's easier to do the citations as you go versus trying to go back and fill them all in at the end. So this is a major paper in our semester. It's actually going to be worth the most point value of any assignment that you have this semester. So please be sure to ask questions if you have them. Give it your best shot and make sure you're doing your best work. And as you go through the process, feel free to reach out if you need help.